So this afternoon, we're with Marty Lehr, co-founder and CEO of Context Therapeutics. And Marty, you've been a key player in the Philadelphia cluster. One of the things that I've been interested in is what was the light bulb moment for the therapeutics that you're working on at Context?
First, Joe and Cliff, thanks for having me on. There wasn't a singular aha moment. I wish there was. It was kind of the proverbial following the breadcrumbs to an outcome. And the breadcrumbs for me was a career spent in my formative years and continues to be in oncology, starting at Sloan Kettering and then progressing to Osage University Partners, which at the time in 2009 was an upstart venture capital fund in the Philadelphia region. At Osage, I focused on small molecule oncology, and over that time got very interested in what I wasn't investing in. So at Osage, I was investing in bleeding edge academic technologies. I got very interested in distressed assets. I thought there were significant untapped opportunities in that space, the proverbial diamonds in the rough. And if you could find those drugs that had warts on it and spend a little time or a lot of time and money knocking those warts out and off, you could reposition a drug and develop it. And because you acquire the drug cheaply because it's distressed, the incremental valuation that you get from improving the profile of that compound and repositioning it for preclinical or clinical studies is tremendous. And so it was a confluence of events that brought me to Context. I started with an academic technology. That's where my roots are. We then acquired a drug from a company called Arno Therapeutics. Arno was in the process of winding down in late 2017. The company operated out of Cranberry, New Jersey. So proximity definitely played a role. Cranberry is not too far from Philadelphia. And so we were able to get to know the team there and the asset and thought it had tremendous opportunity in female cancers. And the last part of what drew me this was within oncology, I was very interested in a specific group of cancers called hormone-driven cancers. That encompasses breast, ovarian, endometrial, and prostate cancer. So basically cancers that are driven by hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. And what's unique about these cancers is they're not particularly immunoresponsive. In many cases, they're not particularly chemotherapy responsive. What they're responsive to is basically drugs that block hormones or the action of hormones. And so what people seek is better versions of anti-hormonal drugs that can work with them. And so that's where we come in. So I think there's a real large opportunity here. It is distinct from IO, and IO is unlikely to make significant inroads in this market. And so there's a nice little fence naturally built around what we're doing from the big boys, which is large pharma, who plays a disproportionate role within the IO space.
Well, thank you. That's a great introduction to how you've assembled the company. And so what stage of the game are you at now? Can you give us a little bit of insight into how things are progressing and also what the next steps are?
Yep. So Context is a semi-virtual company. We operate out of Philadelphia in downtown. Our lead drug, which is an oral progesterone receptor antagonist. Progesterone has been shown clinically to play a role in breast, ovarian, and endometrial cancers. So that's where we're focused. The drug is, well, until COVID, it was in a lot of trials. Currently, it's in one trial for ovarian cancer. And once things open up again, it will be in multiple phase 2 trials being evaluated both as a monotherapy and in combination with standard of care agents such as anti-estrogens. And these will be phase 2 trials for them in the US and one in Europe.
You know, I'm often asked this question, and I'm curious your answer. What from the standpoint of scheduled progress, what is the impact and delay you're anticipating from the COVID-19 outbreak?
Yeah, I vacillate wildly between wishful anticipation and thinking I can't predict anything. So on the wishful side, I think clinical trials in oncology, and that's what I know and can speak to, by and large will resume in June and July. But just because they resume doesn't mean that new patients are going to come strolling in. So you think about the last 3 months, in our case for ovarian cancer, none of our patients have come in to get a CAT scan, a CT scan. So what we know is that they're responding to our drug. There's been no bad safety signals, but we don't know what the drug is in fact doing to the tumor over this time period. So those patients first have to come in and get their scans. And then we think once they get their scans, then the treating oncologist will be able to start enrolling new patients. So you're looking at probably like a 2 or 3 or 4 month lag from things opening to actually new patients rolling in. So that could be late summer or early fall. And you think about all told, that's going to be, depending on the trial, a 6 to 9 month delay industry-wide, which is just massive. And for some companies, particularly those cell and gene therapy companies, where you either need to administer the drug inpatient, so you need a bed within the hospital, or there's a real side effect risk where you need an ICU bed available if something happens. How do you do that now? You know, are the Sloan Ketterings and Penns of the world going to be willing to give up ICU beds? It's not a payment thing. There's just not enough of them. And so would they actually be willing to do that? And I don't know. So I think there's going to be a really interesting time. And Q3 is probably the time period we're going to learn a lot more about where places are opening up and what companies, you know, sort of crack the nut to get patients enrolled. And then we'll all try to follow their lead.
Let's shift the discussion a little bit and talk about the Philadelphia cluster. Marty, in your efforts, some of the therapies that you identified weren't even based here in Philadelphia. What made you choose to grow the company, base the company here, grow the company here, and what's the outlook and forecast for you moving forward?
Yeah, so I'm a lifelong Philadelphian. I went to school in the city, both secondary school and for university. So I am horribly biased towards Philadelphia. And anyone who knows me will appreciate that. But that being said, Philadelphia has gone through a fundamental change as it relates to biotech startups. There was a perception that maybe 15 years ago, Philly was a startup city for biotech. And I just don't think we ever were. You had a time period 10, 15, 20 years ago where stuff would slip out the back door of Sterling or SmithKline or the like, but it wasn't true, you know, entrepreneurial activity. What fundamentally changed over the last 5 years was the driving force that is Penn, Jefferson, Temple, and a variety of other academic institutions, CHOP, in the Philadelphia region, who are both creating companies, and actually those institutions are committing capital in some cases to their companies. That created a massive influx of cell and gene therapy companies. And so that's been the really core of the growth in Philadelphia. And those are great bedrock biotech companies to have for an area. Their IP is really know-how. Their manufacturing process is highly regulated, and they require significant human capital. So you take all those factors combined, these are companies that need a lot of physical space. They have very specific space needs, and they have really sticky human capital. And so that's the great starting material to build a local community. And then ultimately, because the IP is more know-how, it doesn't really expire. And so you have the makings for a high growth industry, one where even if a pharma company comes in and acquires a company, they're unlikely to move that company. It would just become a subsidiary in the Philadelphia region. And so you see massive growth in the Philadelphia region as a result. In turn, investors now appreciate Philadelphia as being a thought leader in the cell and gene therapy space. There is benefit to being proximate to the universities. And so what you've seen as a result is massive growth in Center City for biotech companies. And I think what is a really interesting kind of existential almost question is, with COVID and the likely downsizing of commercial leases for more white collar work, you know, there's always been a desire for biotech companies to be in urban settings because the universities are there. And so if there's more space available, which has been the biggest challenge in Philadelphia, there may actually be even more companies moving to the region to occupy that space and grow that.
Marty, that's great. Appreciate the overview and your context on how the Philadelphia cluster has evolved. And we really appreciate your making time, both to learn more about context and also to hear more from you about everything that you're doing, both at your company and also here in Philadelphia. Love that you're such an ardent, diehard, committed Philadelphian. That's a great part of the story.
Spread my wings and move far away from my family. I live 6 blocks from my parents and half a block away from my sister. So, love Philly.
That's great. Well, thanks.